On today's episode, we continue to discuss While Idaho Slept by J. Reuben Appelman. We are showing and discussing the Banfield footage from the night of the crime, noise complaint footage, and the first press conference. We also have some questions we want to discuss with you in the chat. We hope you will join us. And as always, everything we discuss is for entertainment and is speculation. Please like and subscribe, and definitely join our discussion in the comments. If you're ready, let's get into it. Welcome back to Typically Unique. I'm Kim Aponte, and I'm here with my husband, Carlos.
Hello. Today, we're going to continue with the While Idaho Slept book. So we did one last week.
Yes.
Talked about the first 4 chapters. We're going to do chapter 5 through 9 this time. The book is by J. Reuben Appelman.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. I'm like killing it today.
Good job. You got the title right.
Title right and the author. All right. Just a quick recap a little bit about the book. This book was written pretty early on.
Yes.
So this is all about things that happened right a few months after the murder. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. So this is pretty early on, not revealing information per se, but it gave us a chance to go back and talk about what were some of the things that were happening at the time, because we started following this very early on, and what was going on at that time. What were some of the things we talked about in the last episode? We talked about the grub truck and how that was such a huge thing. I think you even showed a video from that. We asked some questions to the audience, especially about one of the housemates, like where were they?
So we still want help with that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like we're conducting our own little research project here. Who out there knows anything about where Bethany was that night? We asked it on our last episode. We premiered it with a live audience and then has quite a few comments after, and I don't think it's been talked about yet.
Yeah.
So that's a good one.
And the question was, where was she prior
that night
prior to coming home? Where was she? Was she hanging out with anybody? Did anybody see her? Is there anything in the news that we missed? Because that has still been
yes,
I don't know.
Yes, that was a big discussion on our last episode, because every book or resource we've looked at, they all just say she was somewhere out in the community. Yeah. Until like about 1 a.m.
Oh, okay.
So
yeah.
Where is that? Where was that?
So we're starting this book, chapter 5, and I think it's with there's a suspect, right? And what do they call it? An unsub or something? Or
yeah. So I think the previous book did this too. I've been hearing this word in this book for sure. He keeps calling the suspect the unsub. And it's so weird. Like, I don't know, it's landing on me. I'm like, what is this? So I had to look it up, and it's the unknown subject. So that's what law enforcement and the FBI uses. If it's an unknown subject, they just shorten it to unsub.
Unsub.
I was like, okay.
Okay.
So we will get into.
Is it unknown subject or unknown suspect?
Subject.
Subject. Ooh, weird. Okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I'll double check that for the next episode.
Okay,
but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was unknown subject.
All right.
Yep. So chapter 5 starts out with the Banfield scenario. I am going to insert a video clip of that. There is body cam footage from the police officers who stopped 4 kids running in this. Well, they weren't running at first. They were walking through this big open field that leads to the Sigma Chi house. And who knows where else it leads to, because it is a huge field. It's butted up against a road. And then, so on one side is the field, on one side of the road is a field, and on the other side starts to be like, I consider them, I think, off-campus apartments. So that must be like the edge of campus right there. So there are people on social media that have requested the body cam footage from law enforcement. So that's how we're able to see what actually happened. So there's 4 students, 4 boys, 4 males that the cops stop and one of them comes immediately over to the police. So the author said that he was not with the other 3. He has 2 cans of unopened beer, and they just make sure he's 21, and they kind of let him go. And then the other 3 kind of took off. And so the cop was a little agitated at that and kind of gave him the business a little bit, like, why did you try to evade me? And they said, we thought you were fake. So there's rumors of people dressing up as police around there. So I guess the college kids are like, are you real? Are you a real police officer or not? Plus, these were not police in uniform. They were like undercover or plainclothes police officers. So I guess you wouldn't maybe respond this was at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Almost 3 a.m. At the same time that they say the white sedan starts circling the neighborhood. So there's a lot to see on this body cam footage, because every time the police turn, if they're facing the field, that's all you can see. But when they turn and face the other way, you can almost see like the house. People are trying to look to see if the house is in the distance, if the lights are on, if the lights are off. And one of the important things that is seen are some runners that go behind. Do you remember that? The runners that go behind. You've watched it with me, behind a car. So everybody was like, who, what's going on there? Lots of speculation about that body footage.
Good.
Moscow PD. Come over here, talk to me. Moscow PD. Hey, is that beer?
What's up?
Is that beer in your hand?
Yeah, I'm 21.
You got your ID on you?
I don't.
Okay.
I'll take it back to my apartment if you need.
Okay.
Sorry.
Huh? No, they just took off. I told them to stop, but I'm not going to push it.
Hey, Moscow, wait.
Yeah, you got your ID on you?
I don't.
Okay. I'm going to grab your info just because you got beer and you're walking around with it.
No, it's closed.
Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
I live like right there. I'll take it back if you need.
No, we're just doing alcohol enforcement and running around with beer across the street.
No worries. Sorry about that.
You're good. Okay. So I'm just going to check if everything's good. Since they're not open, I'll let you hang on to them.
Okay.
So
will I get charged with anything?
No,
or?
no.
Okay. Appreciate
But
it.
it's just enough for me to stop, check, make sure you're 21, walking around here in public. Yeah, wait till dispatch comes back and says you're good.
All right, no worries.
You guys taking off on me?
I didn't hear you. Yeah, we thought you were talking.
You all 3 turned around and I pointed my flashlight. You said, hey, come here. You guys all turned around and walked away.
I thought it was just like a fake person on. Yeah, like
How many fake people are out here that you've experienced?
Someone trying to flex us.
Okay, that's fair.
How's your night going?
That's pretty good.
That's good.
Just trying to stay warm.
Is that y'all's car right there?
Yeah.
Undercover.
Well, just trying to save gas. They downgraded us from patrol cars.
Gotcha.
They gave us hybrids to save on fuel. I read that one myself. All right, guys, come on over here. All right, if you guys all want to stand somewhere in this area, don't run off on me. None of you guys are 21. It's one thing to drink in an apartment where no one can see you. It's another thing for us to drive by and see you guys absolutely stumbling down the roadway. Okay, so likely what's going to happen, because you're all underage. What grade are you guys in? What year are you?
Freshman.
You guys are all freshmen?
Yeah.
Okay. You guys had any cop talks or anything like that with our 2 campus officers?
Yeah.
Buzinski, Morris? Okay.
Yeah.
So none of this is a surprise. They've explained this all. They've given all the
1, 2, 3, 4, almost as though they're walking in single file out at night at 3 o'clock in the morning, actually closer to 3:12 in the morning. And as you watch those 4 figures, remember, police say the murders happened between 3 and 4 in the morning.
Good. Yeah, he talked. The author did talk about the Banfield and about the those students being stopped, and I think he was equating it, at least in the book, as the police were in the area, there was something else
Going on right behind
going
them.
on, pretty much in the same area, even though time line wise, they weren't there during, the actual murders, but the car was starting to circle around that same time, not knowing, hey, I think there was some speculation about, well, the lights were still on in the apartment, so this perpetrator didn't want to stop, or maybe did he see some activity happening, in the band field and was like, hey, I don't want to stop, around this time either. So yeah, so it's kind of interesting that this is starting to, not only the Banfield butting up to the apartment, but the timeline butting up to when the murders supposedly took place. So.
Yes, and you have to remember that the original time that they first came out with was 3 to 4 a.m.
Yeah.
So when that was the case, and then you see 4 images of people kind of crouching down, moving quickly behind some cars, like they weren't just walking by, they were like hunched down trying to hide. And it matched up at that time when they said that the crime happened.
Sure.
That was a lot of people were questioning that. And then just one more thing about that is with the police officer's hybrid car, that does look similar to a type of car that could be driving around that night in the air. Like there were a lot of cars that night that everybody looked at, like, does this one look like, the car that was caught on camera, or,
Right.
an Elantra or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so that was chapter 5.
Chapter 5,
all
yeah.
about the Banfield and that 3 o'clock time period.
Yep.
And then chapter 6 just goes on to more about the path of travel of the car, which is at this time outlined in the probable cause affidavit, right?
Right.
And the probable cause relies on video footage in different neighborhoods.
Well, yes, but the author of the book talks about, and again, not exactly sure where he got all his information, but the author of the book says it is a combination of phone records, which I didn't think they had any. Remember, because the author did say this, phone records and
he said cell phone, right? Cell phone
I believe so, and tower pings or whatever, and video footage in the area. So, I found that, especially early on, they didn't know that supposedly the phone either didn't connect or was on airplane mode or shut off, for him to make that statement in the book. So I think most of it was relied on video footage of what was going on.
I did jot down some notes.
Oh, good.
So the PCA narrative that he describes in the book is cell phone, neighborhood videos, and traffic cameras. That's how they pieced it together. And he also said, and even on press conferences or video or interviews that were given, the narrative was, it was a peaceful night. And we're like, there's guys getting stopped in the Banfield. There's people creeping behind cars. There's a party at this apartment complex.
Right.
Like,
there
cars everywhere.
There was a game that day too, right? So there was a lot of people in town. So there
yeah,
was
but I mean, at 3 a.m, it really
so
wasn't
more
quiet.
activity in the town, right? Yeah, than a Wednesday night,
right? So he's describing that after the car is making these 3 passes by the house, the narrative at the time, and I don't know why they think this, but there's a road, the road that the house is on kind of goes up, and he called it like a bluff by the woods. So it's kind of like this, it's not really a parking area, but I think it's like a pull off area off the road. But between that road and the house, it kind of overlooks the house, is a wooded area. And they make it seem like he parked there and watched, like was watching to see, is the house quiet, or that was a narrative for a long time.
Mm.
But that
Okay,
was part of it.
I don't really remember that, but
Yeah. He describes the unsub as dressed all in black with a face covering, and that he entered through the patio doors, went upstairs, and the author referenced a previous tenant in this house. And I've seen this person interviewed on social media channels, and he lived there and said you could hear everything in that house. Like, it was thin walls, creaking, like every step. It was, everything would creak, all the floors, all the steps, everything like that. So the author referenced that, talked about that in the book.
I do remember the author saying that at the base of the stairwell going up to the second or third floor,
Third floor. Yep.
that creaked. I didn't catch him saying that everything creaked, but I did hear.
Oh, I'm adding that.
Oh, okay, because I did hear. Yeah, because I'm talking more about the book because I don't have all the information that you have. So, but yeah, that's good to know.
I'll try to make sure I clarify that.
No, that's
this
fine.
is what the book said. This is what Kim's bringing into it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you're bringing that. I mean, because that's why we're doing this, right?
Yes.
We're trying to match the things that were said at the time or things we knew at the time to things we now know.
We know now.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
yes.
that's fine.
So that leads to the dog barking on the camera. So he talks about that, and that the dog starts barking at the time that the attack is starting to happen.
So in the book, he states clearly, I think, that as he's going upstairs, the dog is barking, which I kind of, I didn't really understand that narrative, because I thought the dog started barking because he opened that door first, supposedly, right?
That's one of the theories.
One of the theories was that he walked upstairs, opened the door, didn't see anybody in that room except the dog, and that's when the dog started barking. But this author says as he's walking up the steps, the dog starts barking, which is pretty specific and counter to what we kind of heard afterwards. We do know Dylan has stated in the PCA that the dog was barking and that she yelled upstairs,
Yelled like 2 or 3 times.
Yeah, like, shut up.
Yeah, I'm trying to sleep down here.
I'm trying to sleep. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So he's describing the girls, the attack on the girls, and he's talking about the weapon. And I thought it was odd or telling that he described the weapon as a long blade, something that I wrote it down, something that could easily slice a watermelon. If you've been following this case for a long time, you know that there's a video out there of the roommates tossing watermelons into the air and slicing them with a machete. So he probably did look at a lot of online videos.
So this was kind of interesting just between you and I, because the moment you equated that to, you were kind of thinking, is the author saying that he had like a Japanese samurai sword and was killing people?
Yeah.
And I was
a machete,
like,
I think long. That's long.
Yeah.
And he said it was, he described it as a long weapon.
Yeah. And I would describe, a knife this long as long and a knife this long. If I'm going to describe something like this, I'm going to call it a sword. I'm not going to call it a knife. The knife is not this big. So that's where we start. I mean, you fixated on that because of the connection with the watermelon and everything. And I was like, I knew you were going to bring that up
but
here.
If you saw what they were using,
you were fixated on it. So I knew you were going to bring that up here. And so maybe this is a community question. When I say a long bladed knife, right? If it's a long nosed cat, I'm not going to say it's an elephant. It's a long nosed cat. If it's a long knife, I take it as that being a long bladed knife, not a sword. I just think those are two different things. So
I don't know. And also,
I want to hear what you guys think.
Yeah.
Mm.
I also thought he was implying, and he must have said this for me to take it that way, about distance. Like, because it was such a long weapon that you wouldn't have to get so close to the victims. And he did say making it more difficult for them to fight off.
Yeah.
So that's why.
I understood where you got it. I'm not saying, that's out of left field. I understand where you got that from, but I just think that they would describe it differently if it was a sword. I'd say it's a sword.
So then he talks about, okay, so the path of travel, that he went upstairs first, then back down to the second floor, describing Ethan in the doorway of Xana's bedroom. And so Ethan's taken out and then shoved inside. So Ethan is attacked at the threshold of Xana's bedroom and then shoved inside. This is in chapter 6, and also describes that there were neck wounds.
Yeah.
And then we're going to come back to this because in the next chapter, I thought he contradicted it, but we'll explain it when we come to that.
Yeah.
And that Xana just was in the room, and that the defensive wounds were also on her arms. She had arm wounds that looked defensive.
And maybe we'll talk about it in a little bit, but as we were talking about this earlier, I just think that if Ethan was attacked in the threshold of the doorway and then pushed, cut, unfortunately, pushed into the room, that it almost seems like Xana came at the person instead of cowering in the room, which I probably would have done. I would have cowered. It looks like she came at it because ultimately that's where she lay. So it's almost like, the perpetrator didn't get all the way in the room, is the way I envision it, the way this author told it. So, but there could be some things out there that says, the perpetrator was all the way in the room, and then left the room. So
this
we could
chapter
talk about
was
it.
just more specific about where Ethan was and not so much where Xana was. And this chapter was just laying out the timeline of how the crime happened, how he parked, entered the house, where he went, who he attacked, and then leaves at 4:20. And then that's the end of this chapter.
Yes.
And then that's also the end of part 1. And then part 2 starts with more
Well, before
of
we get to part 2, you were, telling me something about timeline changes and some today stuff of when the murder happened. Is there anything, I want to give you that opportunity now, if there's anything about, those timeline changes, because
the only thing I thought now is when the steps and going upstairs and the dog barking. We know now from recent hearings that Dylan, the eyewitness, made us in one of her statements said that one of the victims ran up the stairs and then back down the stairs. So I'm assuming it's up to the 3rd floor and back down to the 2nd floor, but they don't say which set of stairs.
Okay.
So that wasn't in the PCA or anything like that. So that was interesting.
Okay. All right. So yeah, in chapter 7, they start talking about,
let me back up.
Yeah.
Chapter 6 ends with he leaves at 4:20 and the sheath was left behind.
Yes.
The important evidence.
Yes. Yeah, which I think we'll talk about that a little bit later too. But, so now the author starts talking about Payne and what Payne saw.
Yes, Officer Brett Payne, who has been on trial testifying a lot lately. He has been in a lot of the hearings because he's the investigator in charge of this whole homicide. Chapter 7 starts with his background, has combat experience, never was a lead investigator of a homicide before. I don't think ever worked on a homicide before.
And if we remember back to Bloom's book, when we talked about Bloom was like, this guy's some war hero and
Yes.
the wolf in the street. And remember all that stuff,
Yes.
And so this guy was a little less dramatic.
Yeah, he just the facts.
Yeah, just the facts. But I think he also gives Payne some accolades in this book, about his previous, resume before becoming, this lead detective on this case.
A little bit, but I think this guy is kind of like, he really didn't have any experience.
Right.
So I think he's kind of highlighting that too. He says that, he doesn't even show up to the scene till later in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So he's late to the scene, which the roommates wake up and not sure what time. Like, we haven't been told exactly when they're awake and seeing everything. All we know is that a 911 call was made close to noon, somewhere between 11:30, 12 o'clock. This author says, which I was surprised by this, that the 911 call was made by Dylan's phone, but not by her.
Yep.
And he names Hunter Johnson. I've always heard that speculated, but I've never heard it like verified. In fact, for a while, I thought it was a for sure thing. And then I don't know why lately I feel like there's question about it again, like who actually made that call. But this author named him, and that Hunter Johnson is Ethan's best friend. So there was a lot of debate and discussion at the time. Why were friends there before you call 911?
Mm-hmm.
So it was bad enough that 8 hours supposedly went by after the crime,
right,
that a 911 call gets made to begin with. And then you find out they're making the call and you didn't call 911 first, you called friends.
Mm-hmm.
That is just a bad look. That, with many people, seemed like a bad look. And then the 911 call was for an unconscious person.
Mm-hmm. We talked a lot about that at the time. It's not, I don't hear it as much, I think, because we're more into the case and is the person in custody the person that's guilty. So I think more of the conversation goes to that. But if there's some alternative suspects
Ding, ding, ding.
that should be looked at, it's certainly Dylan's behavior that morning is something that probably should be vetted. And I'm sure they did, but we don't know that.
So this was the moment when the red flags were waved.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this was the first, like, what?
Right.
And those have been snowballing ever since.
Yeah.
So that's what got this case, I think, really
intriguing
many people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that one, that's just a reaction that people just can't understand. Like, if I was in that position, you always say you don't know how you'd grieve. You don't know how you'd react. Your fight or flight is undetermined until you're in that, right? You don't know if you're going to fight or flight, or freeze. But that one just seemed to be way too long for that initial reaction had to wear off. And then you had to do something, and surprising that it took 8 hours.
Yeah. And I have to say that in the discussions about that, people were very sympathetic, very careful with their words, not wanting to bash survivors, even though it was like a big what. And you would think if it was explainable, then explain it and get that narrative off, because that was heated for a while. I think it still is a question, big question. So the author says that Dylan and Bethany were removed from the scene. We know now from hearings that they did go to get questioned that afternoon. So they were questioned immediately. Right after that, the officers start canvassing the neighborhood.
Well, Murphy was taken from the scene too, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He went to a rehabilitation place for a little bit, then given back to the boyfriend.
The author said that Murphy was found shut inside a bedroom. But we have heard recently that Murphy was found in a room with an open door.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that has also changed. The author said that Murphy was processed.
Okay.
So to me, that means they went over him looking for
DNA
any
or
substances
blood.
that
Yeah.
could.
That makes sense.
Then he was returned to Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, Jack D.
Got it.
And he does have his own social media pages. Murphy does.
Murphy does? All right.
Yes.
Maybe we could put a picture of Murphy up here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll do that.
All right.
Payne described, or the author described Payne saying that the smell of death was distinguishable,
Yeah.
which was why one of the topics of the roommates, how could you stay in that house for 8 hours with everybody that's ever had to go into a crime scene like that, is like, you cannot, like, yeah, you cannot take it.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the contradiction that I thought happened with the previous chapter. This author describes Payne, his first going into Xana's room. So he entered through the front door on the first floor by Bethany's bedroom, goes up the steps, goes to Xana's, and he can see a female body from the hallway inside her room, just inside the door.
Mm-hmm.
And he said positioned unnaturally. So that's not good. And then further inside the room was Ethan from sharp forced wounds. And so to me, in the previous chapter, when it said Ethan was attacked at the threshold and then shoved into the room, to me, that's not further in the room. That's like shoved inside the room. And then you wouldn't be able to see, you know, Xana from a clear distance. So I don't know. Carlos demonstrated to me and everything. So we had a full demonstration for Kim on how this could happen.
Well, I guess it's just, it lands on what your definition of shoved is. If shove means, hey, I'm going to push you and you're going to fall 1 inch from where I pushed you, to me, that's not a shove. To me, a shove is you went flailing back into the room. That's a shove. So that's what the author said. So that's, if they paused the video and said, okay, this person's going to shove this person, where do you think they're going to land? And I have to mark where I think they're going to land. It's not going to be 1 inch from where he shoved him. It's going to be feet back from where he shoved him.
I just took it as back inside the room immediately. But that is something we will not find out for sure, probably until the trial.
Yeah.
This is where the author describes how horrific the scene was and how much blood was in the room, that it was so much that it drained outside. The outside walls had drippings going down it. And there was a photo of that. And there was a lot of discussion of that at first. Was it from the pipes? Or not everybody was like conspiracy theory crazy with, oh, it's got to be this, like trying to be cautious with what it was. But even the authors of these books are saying that's what it was. I thought it was bold of him to make a statement that must have been referencing the phone calls. So we know during the night that Kaylee and Maddie they made a lot of phone calls to Kaylee's ex-boyfriend, Jack D.
So so in the previous episode, we talked all about that. Just a quick recap of that is they went to the bar. He was there. They were talking, long conversation, looked like maybe some things were resolved. The girls start walking. They passed this camera, was like, hey, what did you say to Adam, who is Jack's roommate and best friend? I told him everything. Now there seems to be some more information that needs to get cleared up. So there was a bevy of phone calls that happened once the girls ultimately got home.
They got home.
Yeah.
To him, to Jack.
Yeah.
The author says that those phone calls were because Kaylee was trying to get back together with Jack.
Yes.
And I'm like, where did you get that from? Because it was a bold statement.
And one of your theories was that, hey, come bring the dog, or maybe having something to do with the dog, you know? So
right. But that's not getting back together.
that's not getting back together. So that was pretty good. So I wonder where he got that information to say that.
And for our next episode, I'm gonna make a note to myself. I'm gonna go back because we're listening to this as an audio book. We don't
Yeah.
have the book, but I need to know who his references are. Like, who did he get his information from? So we've gone through the victims, and he gets to and this is pain. So this is about pain.
Yeah.
The tan leather knife sheath being found. They described it as a military blade. So this sheath like had stamping on it that was military related, and it was found under Maddie and in the sheets.
Entangled in the sheets.
Entangled in
Yes.
the sheets was the way and the author says, and I mean, this is the chapter about Brett Payne. So he's kind of speaking from his experience and what he went through. He says he was thinking, was it planted on purpose or left accidentally?
Yeah. And I want to make clear that the author says that it was visible under one of the victims and entangled in the sheets. Didn't say it wasn't visible.
Well, that's odd because in the documentation from hearings and released court documents and things like that, it wasn't found immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So the first responders who went in and processed the scene did not find a sheath.
So
it was later found.
I hear this a lot. Like you say this a lot. I think the community says it a lot. And I'm not saying it's wrong. You guys might be right. But every Dateline that I watch, so a policeman shows up, right? Somebody shows up to the scene.
Mm-hmm.
They look around and they're like, oh my gosh, we have a crime scene here. We need to preserve the crime scene. We need to call in the people who need to look at the details. My job is not to look at the details. My job is to preserve the area.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's easy. I've heard the community say a lot that, oh, this wasn't found right away. I don't know if it was like that was their responsibility to find it right away. That's not what they're there to do. They are there to preserve the area, back away from these people, make sure they don't add any DNA or, touch things or do anything like that and disturb the crime scene. They have to call in these other people that are now going to assess. So if a cop showed up at noon, they didn't find the sheath to 3. To me, that is no big deal. But you've said this over and over and over and over again. And I'm like, not that it's wrong. I'm just saying, I don't know if that's what is supposed to happen in these type of situations. So I just wanted to say that because I really haven't challenged that much, but I
understand what you're saying. Then don't say that. Don't word it that way. Like in a report, it says later found. It was later found, implying the first time we processed the scene, this isn't mentioned. But later, after going through a second or third time, someone's like, oh, hey, there's a sheath here. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So
yeah, no, I agree with you.
I do need to look at the documentation and everything to verify that, but that's why it's a big deal.
Okay. No, I hear that. If the detectives were like, didn't see it, and then the coroner kind of does their thing and picks up the body and is like, oh, hey, now I see it, but I didn't get the idea that the sheath was fully covered, that it was visible, At least that's what that author said. So
he said partially under her body and entangled in the sheath.
Yeah.
That you don't really know because part of it could be under her body and the rest of it could be under the sheets, and then you can't see it.
Could be.
I mean, I'm not saying that it's bad that it wasn't seen the first time, but it's just weird to bring it out that way, like later known. Just made it seem suspicious.
I get you.
And he ends the chapter with talking about Maddie and Kaylee and that one was more brutal than the other. And mentions the overkill again. He said that, I don't know if he said it outright or if he was just implying, but he did say overkill, meaning like targeted, like that would be the one who was targeted.
Right. So next chapter is about Fry.
Yes. The next 2 chapters really, but chapter 8 is about Chief Fry. And he gives his background also. He was a University of Idaho graduate, got his degree in criminology. He spent time training with the FBI on intelligence. It really seemed like a highly educated person, and that because he spent so much time in this town, the crime really was personal to him, personal to the town. He took it personally. And then basically this chapter is like describing the scene once they start collecting evidence. So he talked about the police officers that are there. They're going door to door. They're talking to the neighbors. They're looking for tire tracks outside. They're searching through the dumpsters, all of that.
Quick question. When you say tire tracks, I know it was wintertime when this happened. Was there snow on the road?
So early in the evening, like we watched that grub truck video, there wasn't any snow. It was just freezing, but it did snow like early morning, later that night. Though I don't know, at some point it did snow. By the time it was when the police responded, I think there was maybe a coating of snow on the ground.
But if you saw, on the video that the car was parked over here and then there was some tire tracks leading away from there.
Oh, in the snow, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think I think it was pavement and gravel during the time that this happened. Okay. Yeah.
First time I've asked that question. So.
Good question, babe.
Thank you.
He also described the author that the media was there taking pictures right away. Said that Fry described the scene as blood on the walls, blood on the floors, blood on the mattresses. The coroner has also been on interviews saying that it was like that also. And that Fry said that the victims were not tied or restrained and no SA.
Yes, correct.
Then he goes into the house, and I'm going to insert a video here to show what he's talking about. So this house turned over many times with different groups of people living in it. Sometimes it was all guys. And I don't know. To me, everything I've heard, it seemed like this is the first time all girls lived in it, or maybe for a long time, it's the first time all girls lived in it. But it was a party house, and the cops showed up there often for noise complaints. And so when I insert the video, you'll be able to see how the police interact with how do they approach the house? How are they talking to the people that are there? It was always odd with these girls. All the videos that are out there, and these are released body cams. There were always frat guys there, and they're not boyfriends. They're just the frat guys that are always there, and they're the ones that answer the door and come out and talk. So you'll be able to see that in the video.
No one's coming to the door.
You want to send her right back. You knock at the front door and I will stand. All right, be right back. Yep, thanks, man. Yeah, I took one look at that speaker. I said,
Huh, no stairs to the back deck. Interesting.
Is this your place?
Yeah.
Perfect. You know over here.
I assume noise.
Noise, yeah.
Yeah.
Big speaker right there.
Yeah.
Nothing against having a party. Once neighbors start calling in, then we have an issue.
Fair.
You go to school?
Yeah.
Okay. What year?
Senior.
Senior. Okay. So I'll tell you the same thing I told them. You probably know the drill, right?
Actually, no.
Oh, okay. So usually, at least for me, I'll give you a verbal warning.
Okay.
Once I have neighbors calling in, your music's too loud, you're disturbing the peace.
Yeah.
Nothing against having parties, nothing against having people over who are overage to drink. But again, once we start disturbing the neighbors, then we've got an issue.
Yeah.
Always ticket is up to 300.
Yeah, somewhere around 300, 400
It's a
bucks.
pretty expensive ticket. I don't want to give that to you. That being said, this is your place, so I'm going to hold you responsible.
And they get it more
It's your
expensive the
place,
later
you're
it
also
gets.
responsible for everybody here.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna grab
We already warned them
Yeah.
too, so.
And if I do have to come back here, $300-some tickets going to be
Okay.
and it only gets more expensive. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
Actually, what's your phone number for you? Is this 1122 here?
Yeah.
Okay.
But he's describing it as a party house.
Let's reestablish. We're still talking about Fry.
Talking about Fry,
Okay.
but this is the author, I guess, making Fry's point. He also mentions Kaylee's sister knowing that there was a code on the front of the house that you would need to enter through the front. So the lock had like numbers that you would have to type in, but because there were so many people that were in that house, even before these girls lived there, how many people know that code? It seemed like it was widely known that that was freely given out. The code was given out. So that would be easy access for somebody that knew the house to get into the house.
So codes can be changed. Don't know when and if they ever changed them.
Good point.
The perpetrator did not enter through that area where they needed the code to get in anyway.
Well, they don't think so.
Right. They don't think the perpetrator entered in that, Yeah, but we talked about the code a little bit, and it's like, wonder if it makes a sound, a big sound. Does it lock all the time, or can the alarm be disabled? So, but I think for this, where they think the perpetrator entered, it's really
They think the perpetrator entered through the sliding doors in the back.
Yeah.
And we were bringing up the beeping of the numbers because there's video cameras around there. Because we had that conversation. We were talking about Ethan and Xana getting home.
Yeah.
Trying to prove them getting home. Yes. We thought about a camera going off. He talks about Fry. The author talks about Fry saying that Dylan and Bethany were cooperating, but also that Dylan could not identify
Kohlberger.
Yes.
And it was a picture lineup, right? It wasn't a physical lineup that they were 5-7 guys standing in front of her.
I've heard recently, because documents have come out, it wasn't even a lineup of photos. It was just a photo of him.
Oh, I don't even know if they're allowed to do that.
I don't either, but
but
we'll go back and verify that because that's not something that I have any evidence for, but that's what I've heard.
But if they're just saying, hey, do you know this person?
Yes.
Right. That's could be different than saying, hey, did you see this person at the scene?
Or does this look like the person? Maybe that's what they did. I don't know.
You should have more than one picture if you're trying to do identification of somebody at the scene. But if you're just saying, hey, has this guy been around? Have you seen him around at the house, following at the restaurant that would be different. So I don't know the context. I thought from what I thought I heard, it was a photo lineup and that she couldn't pick out Kohlberger.
In the chat, let us know what you know about that. So if it was a lineup or what we know about the photo being shown.
But I see it both ways. I'm not saying either's bad. I can understand it both ways, but I heard it differently. That's all.
We've always heard that it should be lots of photos.
Yeah.
The guy.
Yeah. Like wink, wink. Like,
Right.
I mean,
Does this look familiar?
Oh gosh, that would be horrible.
So Fry is explaining the author's explaining that Fry is letting the public know that the state police are brought in immediately and the FBI shortly after,
Mhm.
and that Fry is going to handle like the public speaking portion, and he's going to manage interactions with the state police and the FBI. And he kind of picked Payne to be the lead investigator because he was confident he could like work behind the scenes, but Fry was going to kind of be out front.
Right.
And they're setting up the press conference that Fry does for the first time, and the author describes it as a blundering press conference, and that I think he got that wording from the Daily Mail and News Nation. Like, after this press conference, I guess they just went to town on it, like picking it apart and everything.
For sure.
So that leads into chapter 9 is all about the press conference. So I do have clips from that press conference I'm going to insert so you can hear it and see it for yourself.
And some of the highlights.
My name is Chief James Fry with the Moscow Police Department. I'm going to be reading from my notes today because I want the information you receive to be extremely accurate. We know you have questions, and so do we. That is why we're here. I'd like to thank everyone for attending this press conference. The Moscow Police Department would like to extend our condolences to all family members, friends, the University of Idaho, and the Moscow community. This was a horrible crime that took the lives of Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Goncalves. This horrible crime has affected all of us, the families, the University of Idaho, our community, our country, and our officers. Agencies that are involved in this task force include the Utah County Sheriff's Office, the Idaho State Police, and the Federal Bureau of Investigations. As we continue our investigation, we have learned that Ethan and Xana were at a party on campus, and Madison and Kaylee were at a downtown bar. They arrived home sometime after 1:45. If anyone in our community or across our nation has any information about these times or the victim's whereabouts, please call our tip line. The facts of the case that we know right now. We know that these homicides occurred in the early morning hours of Sunday, November 13th. Around noon, Moscow officers received a call of an unconscious person. Officers discovered the bodies of Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Madison Mogan, and Kaylee Goncalves inside the residence on King Road. The four were stabbed with a knife, but no weapon has been located at this time. There was no sign of forced entry into the residence. Investigators are continuing to collect evidence at the scene. Investigators are working to develop a timeline to relevant events. Autopsies are taking place today on all the victims so we can continue to gather evidence and solve the crime. Investigators are working to follow up on all leads and to identify a person of interest. Based on details at the scene, we believe this was an isolated, targeted attack on our victims. We do not have a suspect at this time, and that individual is still out there. We cannot say that there's no threat to the community, and as we have stated, please stay vigilant, report any suspicious activity, and be aware of your surroundings at all times. What we don't know, the identity and location of the suspect, the location of the knife or any clothing that was worn by the suspect. Currently, we have 25 plus investigators working this case.
And some of the highlights of that were, I mean, some things that we even thought of at the time that the author talks about is, you know, saying this was a targeted attack, don't worry, you know. And I was like what? You know, I don't care if it was targeted or not. I still would be worried.
Oh, for sure. His targeted for what was my question. So I went to ChatGPT because I've always wondered this from the beginning. What did they mean by that? And I asked you, what would you need to see in a crime scene? Because that's what they say. Based on what we saw, we believe this was an isolated, targeted attack. And to me, they were saying that like, it's okay. No one else is at risk.
Yeah.
We don't think this person's going off after everyone else. And I asked you, what would you need to see in that crime scene for it to be like that? So according to how law enforcement determines that, is that you're not going to see a ransacked house. It's not a burglary. So, anybody could be susceptible to a burglary.
That makes sense.
You're not going to see any of that. Forced entry focused on one area, which is interesting because there was no forced entry in this case. Victim selection.
Which they probably thought because one of them was overkilled.
Right. The specific weapon would be like a gunshot wound or a stab wound. So it's not just something impulsive. Basically, it's like it's planned. So when they say isolated, targeted, it's like planned.
Yeah.
So we're not going in there to rummage around. We're bringing a weapon with us. We know how we're getting in the house. We're going in and going out. So you're not going to see them lurking around.
And we're going after somebody specific.
Well,
that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Go Chat GPT.
Yeah, it had some good stuff in here. Personal items aren't touched.
Yeah.
Because they're not stealing things.
No, I get the essence of what that's saying. That's good.
Yeah.
That explains it for me a lot better. So, yeah, but I think at the time still, someone was on the loose and, it's not like, hey, calm down, everybody. Everything's going to be okay. We didn't know if everything was going to be okay. And people left in mass after this, so that presser was not a comforting to the community.
So this happened on November 13th. The presser was 3 days later, and he started off with saying, oh, I probably should have been here a few days ago. And you'll see his demeanor during it when he's answering questions and everything. But Fry spoke, the state police colonel spoke, and the president of the university spoke, which a lot of people question. He was at all the press conferences. He inserted himself a lot. I could understand him being there at the beginning because it's his university,
his students.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think they also talk in the book. They didn't have a suspect at the time during that press conference. Did they mention the late 911 call at that press conference? I can't remember if he said that in the book or not. That it was isolated. So that's what the book kind of talked about. But Kim having the actual press conference and able to put it on there, we can kind of see what.
Yeah, you'll see, because he gives his statement about all of that, and it's trying to reassure everybody, but then they let the press ask questions, and you'll see they asked very good questions. A lot of them were about the surviving roommates, why the late 911 call, and
were they witness to?
Yeah, did they witness anything? Yeah. And he said, I never said they were a witness. And then later we found out one of them was an eyewitness.
And did they have a suspect?
And asking about a suspect. Yeah.
You mentioned that there's an indication that it's an isolated, targeted incident, and there is an individual somewhere. Can you give us a reason as to why there's that belief there is a suspect? And can you also give a little more information on the forced entry? There's no sign of forced entry, but was the door, did it seem like any of the entries were left unlocked by any means?
I'll answer the last part there just because it's at the front end of my mind. We're not 100% sure if the door was unlocked, but there was no damage to anything, and the door was still open when we got there.
And my first question,
Yeah.
if you'd like me to read.
No, I think I haven't. In these cases, we take the totality of the things that we see, and they're very dynamic, right? And they're very big, and there's a lot of information, and we try to take that information, and some of it we can't share with you, correct? But we try to take that information, we try to make the best educated decision we can. We review that as a team with our detectives, along with our prosecutors, along with the university, and we try to make that best decision on that. So we, at that time, believed that there was no a threat, and our goal is to provide safety for this community. That's why we're bringing in the resources we're bringing. We want a close to this, and we want to do everything we can to let the people in our community know that we care. We want them to feel safe. We want them to be safe, and we're going to do everything we can to do that.
I'm Tim with the Daily Evergreen. I was just wondering, were the two other individuals present at the home when police responded at noon?
Yes.
Okay.
Chief, if you don't mind elaborating a bit more on those two people. Well, was it two people? What have those people shared about the circumstances of that night, what they saw or didn't see?
Well, I'm not going to go into what they shared that night. Obviously, that's part of our investigation. That's part of the information that we're trying to build our complete story with. So at that, as far as that goes, we're not going to go any further into what they know and what they don't know.
How many were there?
We believe two.
Hi, Heather Roberts with ABC News. Just to follow up on what she asked, so the other two roommates were there at the time of the attack?
All the information that we have from our investigation is that, yes, they were.
Okay, but they were unhurt?
That is correct.
So is there any explanation as to why it took so long then for someone to call 911? You have surviving witnesses to an incident at 3 or 4 in the morning, and the 911 call didn't come until noon?
I don't think I ever said that they were witnesses. I said they were there. We don't know why that call came in at noon and not in the middle of the night. Would have we loved for that to have happened? Yes, but that's not how it took place. So that's why we're investigating everything still, to try to pull all the pieces together.
Were they one of the people, were they the 911 caller?
At this point in time, I'm not going to divulge who our 911 caller is, just because I want to keep the integrity of the investigation at this point, okay?
Okay. And last question, are you able to tell whether the same weapon was used on all 4 victims?
That's why we're having the autopsies done. The autopsy will confirm that and hopefully collect some evidence for us, even from those. That's why you do the autopsies, is to try to be thorough and try to gather more. So we'll leave that would probably be something that would come out later.
Yeah, they were very inquisitive about that.
So yes, we are going to end it there. Again, the book is While Idaho Slept by J. Reuben Appelman. We don't actually have the physical book. Like Kim mentioned, we're listening to it on audio as we do some chores around the house, So
lately we've been building furniture and moving rooms, moving furniture around,
doing all crazy stuff. I mean, Kim's still teaching full time. We just finished Valentine's Day. She got some really nice stuff for Valentine's Day from some of her students. So
it was awesome.
Yeah, she really liked that. So we're still doing life things and trying to fit in the book and do the podcast as well. So this was I'm actually kind of getting into it. This is my second go round on the book. I already listened to it once, and I liked it just because it took me way back over there. So that's where I wanted to be. I think Kim is bridging the gap between, okay, here's what we knew then, let's compare it to what we know now, and how did that journey happen? So I love that. Yeah.
I'm chomping at the bit because we're gonna get there. So bear with us.
Yeah.
But when this book gets into more of the suspect and the deeper investigation, I am going to pull in everything we're finding out now, because our minds have been blown lately by this last hearing, the transcripts of the closed hearing were released. So we're finding out some nuggets in there.
And what's interesting is you take this book, which was timestamped 3 months after, or 4 months after the murder, to 2 years later, and us saying, well, look how much that's changed. Wait till, and we're having all of this discussion about it now. Wait till the trial comes and all the things that we're discussing now, how much that's going to change when the trial comes out.
True.
So, I mean, there are all steps in this process, but I like the journey.
Yes.
I have to admit that, there's nothing that's really being said that I'm not familiar with the origin of what's going on. So again, Jay Rubin, Appleman, While Idaho Slept. We will catch you next week. Please subscribe. It's free. It costs you nothing.
Share it out with your friends.
Share it with your friends.
We appreciate it. See you back here next time. Bye.
So high, I'm hypnotized. What's up is down, what's left is right.